My name is Eleanor Bishop, and I flew 1,600 miles to watch my son marry a woman I'd never met, only to be erased with 5 words. Actually, it's just her family. That was the text. No punctuation, no explanation. Just a digital breath that blew out everything I had carried in my chest for months. I stood in the terminal, the rolling handle of my suitcase still clenched in my hand. A little girl beside me pointed at a vending machine and begged her mother for gummy bears. Life carried on around me like I wasn't standing still inside a moment that would split my life into before and after. I didn't cry. I felt like I might. I wanted to, but I didn't. My body filled with a pressure that felt like water and glass, fluid and cutting, sloshing with every heartbeat, but not a single tear. Instead, I walked to the nearest bench, sat down slowly, and smoothed the skirt of the dress I'd booked for the occasion. Midnight blue, pearl buttons, nothing flashy. I'd wanted to look respectful, celebratory, like a mother who belonged. I paid for the trip myself. No one offered to fly me out or reserve the hotel. I volunteered, thrilled just to be included. I packed the veil my mother wore in 1952. I wore it in 1975. I'd had it cleaned and preserved, wrapped in tissue and tied with a pale ribbon. There was also the card, a handwritten note and check, not extravagant, but generous, and a small gold locket with their initials engraved in cursive. All of it sat in the suitcase by my feet, looking like artifacts in a museum exhibit for misplaced affection. He knew I was coming. I'd told him the flight details, the hotel address, the exact time I would land. And he waited until I was on the ground, in the same city, in the same time zone, breathing the same air, before he deleted me from the narrative with one single message. I read the text again, hoping for some hint of doubt or kindness in the spacing between the letters, but it was flat. Final. I zipped up my coat, stood tall even though my bones wanted to fold in half, and walked toward the cab line. Maybe someone was watching, maybe not. But if the universe had its eye on me, I wasn't about to let it see me crumble. The cab driver had tattoos up both arms and didn't ask questions. When he asked if I was in town for the wedding, I said, "Not anymore." The ride was silent after that. California glided past the windows, bright skies, palm trees, everything too cheerful for the kind of hollowness blooming inside me. At the hotel, I checked in, tipped the bellboy more than I usually would, and stood in the room like a woman who had just been unplugged. The view was of a parking lot, a strip mall pharmacy, and a frozen yogurt place with cartoned fruit on the windows. Not what I'd imagined when I booked it. I unpacked like I still had a reason to be there. First the veil. I laid it out gently on the bed like a fragile person sleeping. Then the card, then the locket. I placed them in a neat row on the desk, like evidence. Evidence of what? Love? Loyalty? A mother's delusion? He wasn't always like this. He used to cry when I dropped him off at preschool. He used to leave me crayon drawings of our house with a sun and little hearts. He'd ask questions about rainbows and ask if the moon followed our car. I stayed up with him when he had the flu, made volcano dioramas for science fairs, spent hours pretending to like Lego figurines I didn't understand. I was there. All the way. Always. And now he'd decided I didn't fit. I didn't cry. Not when I unpacked, not when I set down the gift envelope or touched the veil. I just sat in the armchair by the window until the sun faded and neon flickered across my face from the pharmacy sign. Then I got up and made a list on the hotel notepad. 2 items. Cancel transfer to Andrew. Call Madeline. Madeline is my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, but suddenly I knew exactly what I needed to say. Because if I wasn't welcome at the table, I'd stop paying for the meal. I folded the veil back into the box, placed the locket inside, sealed the envelope. Not with sadness, but with something heavier. With resolve. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and stale carpet. I sat again by the window, watching the sky fade to slate. I hadn't even opened the suitcase beyond the gifts. I hadn't admitted to myself that I was truly alone here. Not just in the room, but in this part of his life. I had come for Andrew's wedding. I had come bearing something old and meaningful. I brought the veil my mother Patricia had stitched by hand. Lace so delicate you had to breathe gently near it. I paid more to preserve that piece of cloth than I spent on my own gown. I imagined presenting it to the bride, telling her the story of the women who wore it, who loved through wars and losses and quiet years. I imagined her thanking me. Instead, it would stay folded forever. I didn't sleep that night. The sheets were too stiff, the pillows too firm. I lay on my side and stared at the ceiling, waiting for a sound, a message, an apology. It never came. By morning, I'd made my mind. I called the front desk and asked for the number of a local law office. The man on the phone gave me 3. I chose the second one at random. I liked the name. It sounded like a place that took women like me seriously. They could see me that afternoon. I dressed carefully. Slacks, a light sweater, the necklace Clara made me when she was in 2nd grade. I put the veil and locket in the hotel safe and slipped the gift envelope into my purse. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I wasn't ready to let go of that decision. The law office was wedged between a dry cleaner and a dentist. Beige building, cracked sidewalk. But the woman who met me at the door had white hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and still believed in right and wrong. Her name was Helen. I need to change my will and establish a trust. She nodded, not asking why. In her office, she poured me water. I didn't drink it. I want to remove my son Andrew Bishop as beneficiary. She blinked but said nothing. And I want to designate my granddaughter Lily instead. May I ask why? She said gently. Because she's the only one who still sees me. And because I won't leave my life's work to someone who deletes his mother with a sentence. Helen didn't look shocked. She just nodded. We can do that. She's 18, college student, brilliant. But I want a clause. No access until 25 unless it's for school, health, or a home. Smart, she said. You're protecting her from the weight of a gift she hasn't asked for. No, I corrected. I'm honoring her for the love she gave freely. It took 2 hours. When I left, I had a folder full of documents and a quiet steadiness in my steps. I didn't feel triumphant, just finished. Back at the hotel, I texted Lily. Are you free for lunch tomorrow? She answered in under 2 minutes. Of course. Where should I meet you? And just like that, I wasn't uninvited from everything, just from one wedding. Lily met me at a quiet cafe 3 blocks from the hotel. She was wearing jeans and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a braid like she used to wear it when she was 10. She spotted me before I saw her and came over with arms already outstretched. She hugged me like I was something worth holding on to, and for the first time in days, I let myself lean into that embrace. You look beautiful, she said, her voice soft, but full of that old sincerity she always had. I almost said, don't lie, but stopped myself. Let her say it. Let her mean it. I'd spent too many years brushing off kindness like it had an expiration date. I smiled instead, and we sat down at a table outside, shaded by an awning that fluttered a little in the breeze. We ordered simple things, iced tea, sandwiches, and made small talk for a few minutes, dancing around the truth like it wasn't already sitting between us. Then she leaned forward and asked it, plainly, without judgment. Grandma, what happened? I took a long sip of my tea before I answered. Your father decided I wasn't invited, that's all. Her eyebrows pulled together. He said you weren't feeling well, that you might not fly. I smiled faintly. Is that what he told you? She nodded. He didn't say much, actually. just that it would be small, mostly her family. Well, that part's true, I said. It was all her family, by design. She looked down at the table, fiddling with her straw wrapper. He shouldn't have done that. No, I said gently. He shouldn't have. I didn't tell her what it felt like in the airport. I didn't describe the way my knees buckled slightly as I read that text. Some burdens aren't meant to be shared with the next generation. Can I ask something? She said, looking up. What happened between you two? You and Dad? I sat back in my chair, the question settling in my chest. What happened implies a single moment, a defined fracture. But it wasn't like that. It was slow, almost invisible, like erosion, like realizing the tide has carried you out farther than you meant to go. He changed, I said, at last. College changed him. Or maybe it was always in him. I don't blame him for growing. I blame him for turning his back. Lily said nothing. She just listened. And that alone meant more than I could express. After your grandfather died, he came home, held my hand at the funeral, cried more than I did. He stayed for 3 days. We cooked, we laughed, we remembered. Then he left, and each visit after that, something inside him closed a little more. I picked up the crust of my sandwich but didn't eat. He married quickly, got a job out west, bought a house, built a life. And somewhere in that life, I became an afterthought. The phone calls got shorter, the holidays fewer. When I offered help, he took it, but with silence, like doing me a favor by accepting. Lily's voice was careful. Did he ever say why? No, I said, but I knew. Knew what? That I embarrassed him. Her hand stilled around her glass. I was a public school teacher. Simple, unpolished. I wore cardigans with loose buttons. I brought 7-layer dip to potlucks. His wife's family, well, they're different. They use the right forks. They speak in measured tones. I never quite fit. That's no excuse, Lily murmured. No, I said. But people don't need excuses to leave. They just need permission. She looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't. She had my bones. I could see it in her chin. I'm telling you this not to make you choose. I'm telling you because no one else will, because it's the truth, and because I want you to know that what your father did to me says nothing about who you are or who you'll become. Thank you for telling me, she said, voice soft but steady. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, the one I'd meant to hand to Andrew and his bride. Inside was the locket. The check was already voided, rerouted, reallocated, but the locket, I'd brought that with intention. I was going to give it to them, but now I think I brought it for you. She opened it slowly, reverently. The locket was small, gold, engraved with the initials L.B. and E.B., Lily Bishop and Eleanor Bishop. Inside, a photo of her at age 5 and one of me when I was about the same age. She blinked fast. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Just say you'll keep it. I'll keep it. That was enough. The veil would go back in its box. The money now lived in a trust she didn't even know existed until this week. But this moment was mine. That night, I didn't sleep deeply, but it wasn't restless this time. It was reflection. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, watching the headlights move across the parking lot. Somewhere in the city, my son is likely finishing a speech, clinking glasses, rehearsing how to greet guests tomorrow. Maybe he mentioned me, maybe he didn't. But the not knowing didn't gnaw at me anymore. I looked at the hotel desk. The locket box sat open, empty now, the veil folded neatly, the envelope discarded. Then I thought of something. Something I hadn't looked at in years. A file folder. I rose, crossed to the suitcase, and opened the bottom pocket. Tucked there was the folder I had labeled Andrew nearly 2 decades ago. I started it when he got married, just for organization. At first, it held simple things. Checks I'd written, emails printed out for reference, notes on conversations. But over the years, it grew. Quietly. Like a ledger of devotion no one ever asked me to keep. I laid the papers out across the bed, one by one. $12,000. Down payment for their first apartment. Temporary help, he'd said. $6,800. Credit card debt after he lost a job. $2,300. Knee surgery. No PTO. High deductible. $8,000. Roof leak. Emergency repairs. A call made in the middle of the night, voice low so his wife wouldn't hear. $3,000. Recent. Marked wedding expenses. Over 20 years, nearly $60,000. Not including holidays, not including groceries when they were tight, not including the new winter coat for Lily every year until she graduated, not including the laptop I overnighted when hers crashed mid-semester, not including love. I didn't keep these records because I wanted repayment. I kept them because I didn't want to feel crazy. I needed proof that the distance between us wasn't imagined, that I had given and given and given and been met with silence. People say love doesn't keep score, but dignity does. I gathered the papers again, stacked them neatly, and placed the folder beside the veil. I didn't shred them, not yet, but I knew I would when I got home. In the meantime, I closed the window, turned off the lamp, and climbed into bed with my own name again. Eleanor. Not Mom, not the afterthought, just me. I slept better than I expected, and in the morning, I'd make one more call. Not to Andrew, to the bank. The next morning, I made the call. It wasn't impulsive, it wasn't dramatic. It was measured, steady, like placing a stone on the ground after carrying it too long. I waited until mid-afternoon when I knew the call center would be less busy. I checked the time difference. Minnesota was 2 hours ahead. And dialed the number on the back of my debit card. I didn't want an app. I didn't want a screen. I wanted to speak to a person, a real one. A woman named Denise answered. "Thank you for calling Northstone Financial. This is Denise. How can I assist you today?" Her voice was chipper, polished. "My name is Eleanor Bishop," I said. "I need to cancel all external transfers from my accounts and remove any secondary access currently granted." There was a short pause as she typed. "Certainly, Mrs. Bishop. I'll need to verify your identity. May I start with your birth date and the last 4 digits of your social?" I answered calmly, easily, then gave her the name of my childhood pet, Pepper, a beagle with a crooked tail and the loyalty of an anchor. "Thank you," she said after a beat. "I see 3 scheduled recurring transfers, 1 monthly for $900 to Andrew Bishop, 1 quarterly for $2,000 labeled household support, and 1 annual transfer of $5,000 scheduled for next month. Cancel all of them," I said, permanently. She didn't ask why, not right away. "And the secondary access?" she asked. "Revoke it, all of it." I could hear her typing. "Done," she said. Then her tone softened. "Just for our internal notes, shall we label this as fraud, family reassignment, or personal change of circumstances?" "Call it clarity," I said. There was silence, then the quietest response. "Understood." She emailed me confirmation within minutes. I opened it, read every line, every dollar, every severed link. It was all there, tangible, real. For 2 decades, I had acted like an invisible investor in a life I no longer had equity in. I had paid mortgages I didn't live in, funded repairs for cars I never rode in, covered emergencies that became patterns. I did it because I loved him, because I believed that love meant showing up, even when no one asked. But I see now that love without reciprocity is not devotion, it's erosion, and I had eroded long enough. That night, I took out the folder one last time. I laid it open on the bed, each receipt, each transfer confirmation, each little printed email. And the space between each item was where the silence lived, the thank yous that never came, the phone calls that stopped too early, the acknowledgments that never arrived. I stacked the pages neatly again and placed them back in the folder. I zipped it into the bottom pocket of my suitcase. I would shred them when I got home. It wouldn't be erasing history. It would be freeing myself from the record of one-sided love. Then I changed into my nightgown, brushed my teeth, and turned off the lamp. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. But I wasn't waiting. Not for an apology, not for a fix. I had done what I needed. I had redrawn the boundary. The next day, I went for a walk. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because the sun felt good on my face and I needed to feel my feet moving forward for no one but me. I passed a bookstore with a creaky sign, a florist arranging tulips, a child eating a donut too big for his hands. I stood watching them longer than I meant to. Years ago, that had been me and Andrew. A cold day in St. Paul, a cinnamon roll with too much frosting. He got it all over his nose, and we laughed until we cried. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. The ache surprised me, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was warm, untouched by the erosion, a good memory. I turned down a street lined with blooming trees, jacarandas, the petals falling like soft confetti on the sidewalk. I picked one up and held it between my fingers, fragile and persistent. I passed a bridal boutique. In the window, a woman adjusted the train of a gown on a mannequin. She was young, focused, maybe the same age Andrew's bride was. I stood there a long moment, imagining. Maybe in another world, I'd have helped pick out that dress. Sat in a little chair with my hands in my lap, crying quietly as she turned to me in the mirror and said, "Thank you." But we don't live in the maybes. We live in the aftermath. I found a bench beneath a tree and sat. The world moved around me. A jogger passed, 2 teens argued about music, a grandfather held the hand of a little girl with a balloon, and when our eyes met, he smiled, a small smile that said, "I see you." I smiled back. The bakery across the street let out a warm gust of sugar and butter. My stomach growled. I stood, dusted off my coat, and walked inside. "Make sure it has too much frosting," I told the girl behind the counter. She laughed. I carried the cinnamon roll back to the bench and ate it slowly. I tore off pieces with my fingers, watched the world move, and, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was not invisible. Sometimes dignity doesn't look like confrontation or slammed doors. Sometimes it's a woman eating a cinnamon roll on a public bench, savoring her own company, her own silence, her own peace. The law office was quiet when I returned. Upstairs, same navy blazer, same soft click of the pen. Helen greeted me without pleasantries. She already knew I was there to finalize what we had begun. "We've removed your son," she said, handing me the documents. "Your granddaughter is now the sole beneficiary of your living trust and estate." I nodded. "Would you like to include a letter of intent? Sometimes it helps if your decisions are questioned later." "He won't question it," I said. "He won't fight for something he doesn't think I have." She said nothing. "The irrevocable trust includes the age stipulations and access terms." "Perfect," I said. "She deserves a future, but not an unearned one." Helen folded her hands. "Would you like to include a clause preventing Andrew from ever accessing or contesting the trust?" "Yes," I said. "Make it ironclad." The pen in my hand felt heavy, but I signed each page with a steadiness that surprised even me. Eleanor Bishop. Again and again and again. When we were done, she placed the papers in a blue envelope. "Would you like to notify him?" she asked. I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "Let the silence speak." As I left her office, the sun poured golden across the sidewalk. The light didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I walked slowly. I hadn't just signed papers. I had rewritten the story. The part where the mother gets quietly erased, that chapter had closed. And the next chapter, whatever it looked like, would be mine. I hailed a cab. The driver asked where to. Back to the hotel, I said. I have a cinnamon roll waiting. He laughed, and so did I. That evening, after the sun dipped below the edge of the strip mall across from my hotel and the sky went from gold to charcoal, I sat at the little desk by the window, with the hotel stationery laid out in front of me. Cream paper, a faint blue border, an uncapped pen beside my hand. I hadn't planned to write anything. For days I had told myself silence was enough, that letting go could be quiet, that walking away didn't need a note. But silence, I've learned, can sometimes be cowardice dressed as peace. And I wasn't afraid of Andrew anymore. So I picked up the pen, flattened the page, and wrote just his name at the top. Not Drew, not Sweetheart, not the baby I'd whispered over crib rails. Just Andrew, the man, the son who had made a choice. I wrote slowly, carefully, because I wasn't trying to wound, I was trying to be heard. I arrived Thursday as planned. I brought the veil, the gift, and the dress you'll never see. I sat at gate 14 with a suitcase full of history and hope and received your message just before baggage claim. 5 words. Actually, it's just her family. I waited. I thought perhaps it was a mistake or that you'd follow it with an explanation. But nothing came, so I made my own plan. I paused, looked out the window where the pharmacy sign blinked pink against the sidewalk, and kept writing. I stayed in a quiet hotel. I walked the city. I watched strangers be kind to each other. I ate a cinnamon roll alone on a bench and felt more dignity in that moment than I have in years. I thought about what it means to be a mother. I thought about what I gave you, my time, my youth, my energy, my money, my trust. I remembered staying up with you during croup, making birthday cakes shaped like dinosaurs, driving you to piano lessons and spelling bees and soccer games in the freezing cold. You were never unloved. You were never unsupported. And yet, somewhere along the way, you decided I didn't fit anymore. The ink flowed cleaner the longer I went. I was too plain, too small town, too much like where you came from and not enough like where you were going. I never begrudged you your success. I wanted you to have everything. But I didn't know that giving you the world would cost me a seat in it. I reread those lines, then added, I wasn't angry when you sent that message. I was empty. But then I felt something else. Relief. Because now I could stop pretending. I could stop sending quiet love in envelopes and waiting for a phone call that never came. I could stop wondering what I did wrong. It wasn't what I did. It's what you chose. You chose not to invite your mother to your wedding. Not out of cruelty, perhaps, but out of shame. You didn't want to explain me. You didn't want to fit me into your curated life. I pressed the pen to the page again. So I won't be folded. I've canceled all future transfers, removed your access to my accounts. I've rewritten my will. Your daughter Lily is now the sole beneficiary, not to punish you, but because she's the only one who never pretended I didn't exist. She met me at a cafe. She asked what happened. She listened. She stayed. I sat back in the chair and let that truth sit in the air for a moment. No fire, no flare, just fact. You used to be that boy. Maybe one day you'll find him again. If you do, I won't slam the door, but I won't stand at it holding a tray of forgiveness for someone who hasn't asked. I finished the letter with one last truth. Your absence at your wedding didn't look like an empty chair, but it was mine. And now that I've filled that place with my own voice, my own peace, I'm not giving it back. I wish you love. I wish you honesty. The kind that starts with looking in the mirror and asking yourself, what did I choose? Love, because I never stopped. Mom. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in the envelope, wrote his name on the front. I didn't mail it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it existed now. And that was enough. A stone placed gently on a grave, not to mourn, but to say, I came, I remembered, and now I walk forward. The morning of the wedding came quiet and bright, the kind of morning that felt indifferent to human ceremonies. No ache in the air, just sunlight. I dressed not in the midnight blue dress meant for the ceremony, but in a soft gray blouse and slacks. Not mourning clothes, not celebration clothes, just comfortable, presentable, honest. I took a cab to the venue, a private estate tucked up on a hill, the kind with an arched hedge entrance and stone walkways designed to look effortless. The gates were open. Guests walked in, all pastel dresses and press suits, laughter spilling out in soft bursts. I didn't follow them. Across the street, under a blooming tree, there was a bench. I sat. Not to spy, not to guilt, just to witness. I saw the golf cart driver pull up, the photographer snap early candids. I saw two women in matching silk gowns take selfies. I watched the guests mill about, champagne glasses already in hand. And then I saw him. Andrew stepped out of a black sedan, tuxedo tailored, hair parted the way I used to do it with a damp comb when he was 5. He laughed at something the best man said. He looked polished, complete. He didn't look toward the road. He didn't glance back. He walked forward like the past had never existed. A woman in blush pink descended the stairs behind him, dress glimmering in the sunlight. The bride. She smiled, said something I couldn't hear, and looped her arm through his. They walked toward the ceremony. Guests stood. Music swelled. And I stayed on the bench. Veil in my bag. Hands folded in my lap. Somewhere behind the trees, vows were being exchanged. Promises made. Glasses raised. I hoped it would be a kind marriage. I hoped someone had taught them what commitment really looked like, but I wasn't part of that lesson anymore. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes. I counted, not out of pettiness, out of presence. I saw birds flit overhead, heard the faint clink of champagne, watched guests spill back toward the garden for photos. Andrew posed with his in-laws, with his friends, with the officiant. Not with me. Not anymore. I stood, smoothed my shirt, brushed petals from my lap. I didn't feel bitter. I felt light. There is something powerful in witnessing a moment you were excluded from and realizing it did not destroy you. I turned, walked away from the estate, back toward the city, past the bookstore, the bakery, the cafe where Lily and I had sat, past strangers who smiled as they passed, and I smiled back. Because family isn't always who saves you a seat. Sometimes it's who meets you for breakfast the next day, just to ask how you slept. Lily met me the next morning outside the same cafe. Hair in a loose bun, no makeup, eyes shadowed in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. But when she saw me, she smiled. Not politely, not out of guilt, but with something deeper. Relief. Recognition. We sat at a small table near the window, the same one as before. She ordered tea again. I asked for coffee. Strong. We didn't speak for a minute. The hum of the streets settled around us, cars passing, dishes clinking inside, someone's dog barking in short, high bursts. Then I asked gently, "How was it?" She blinked. "Strange," she said. Everything looked perfect, the dress, the flowers, but it felt thin, hollow. I didn't respond. I let her find her words. "No one mentioned you," she said finally. "Not once. I kept waiting for someone to say your name, to ask where you were, but nothing. It was like you didn't exist." "That doesn't surprise me," I said. She bit her lip. "I wanted to say something. During the toasts, I almost did, but I didn't want to make it about me or about you or anything." "You did the right thing." "No, I didn't," she said. "I did the easy thing." Her fingers curled around her teacup. I studied her carefully. Her face was tired, but her eyes were steady, that same steadiness I used to see in the mirror. It skipped her father, but found a home in her. "You're not responsible for my pain," I said. "I know," she answered, "but I still felt it." She reached into her bag and pulled something out. A small, folded napkin. Inside it was the locket. She laid it gently on the table between us, but didn't push it forward. "I brought it with me yesterday. Kept it in the pocket of my dress. I know it's not really a pocket piece, but I don't know. It felt right, like I was carrying you with me." I looked at the locket, then back at her, and slid it softly back across the table. "It's yours. Not just to keep. To wear. To carry forward." She nodded slowly and looked down at her tea. "I think Dad knows I'm upset. He tried to joke with me at the reception, but I barely answered. You don't have to choose between us." "But I already have," she said quietly. "Not sides. Truth. I know who's honest with me. I know who sees me." A silence settled between us. Not a heavy one, but something cleansing, something final and freeing. I felt it then, a shift. Not triumph, not victory. Healing, like a door that had been swollen shut had finally opened. I reached out and held her hand. "I wish I could promise it won't get harder, but it might. The older you get, the more people will ask you to pretend things are fine when they're not." "You're the only one who's ever said that out loud." "You don't owe anyone silence. Neither do you." We sat like that until the sun grew warm on our shoulders and the tea had gone cold. The waitress came by, smiling, and said, "You two look alike." And for the first time in years, I believed it was a compliment, because I wasn't just someone's forgotten mother. I was Lily's grandmother, and that was enough. I flew home the next day, same suitcase, same airport, but nothing inside me was the same. The terminal didn't press against my chest like it had when I arrived. My steps were slower, but more certain. I wasn't returning from something ruined. I was returning with something reclaimed, my self-respect, my voice. The flight was quiet. I stared out the window, watching the clouds form and reform like thoughts I didn't need to hold on to anymore. The sun caught the edge of the wing and turned it gold. I sipped tomato juice and didn't think about who was waiting or who wasn't. I just existed. For me. When I landed in Minneapolis, the sky was soft and gray. Not dramatic, not bleak, just honest. The cab driver didn't speak, and I didn't mind. My street looked exactly as it had. That felt like comfort, not disappointment. The front door creaked when I opened it, the same creak it always made. The smell was faintly lavender and old wood. I stood in the doorway a moment, breathing it in. Then I set my suitcase down and walked through each room like it was new. The kitchen with the chipped tile, the living room where George's chair still sat beneath the reading lamp, the bedroom where the photo of him and Andrew still rested on the nightstand. I didn't touch it. I didn't turn it down. I just let it be what it was. A moment, frozen, untouched by what came after. I made myself tea. Not the hotel tea, my tea. Chamomile and mint, a spoonful of honey, in the mug that said, "World's Okayest Mom," a gag gift from Lily when she was 12. I sat by the window and watched the light settle on the porch. The daffodils had opened fully now, bold, bright and yellow, like they had something to prove. I didn't cry. I thought I might. I thought coming home would unlock the grief. But I felt calm. Clean. Like a room finally aired out. Later, I opened the drawer, the one that sticks a little on the left side. Inside it was the folder, Andrew's folder. I pulled it out and brought it to the table. I turned each page one last time. Every receipt, every transfer, every quiet gesture of a mother trying to stay close to a son who had already drifted. Then I took the shredder from the hallway closet and fed each page through slowly. Not with anger, with peace. This wasn't destruction. This was pruning. You cut what doesn't grow. You make room for what might. When the folder was empty, I placed it at the bottom of the trash. Light, considering how much of my life had just passed through that machine. Then I went to the linen closet and pulled out the box. The veil. I laid it across the bed, ran my fingers over the lace. It was still beautiful, still whole, still something. It didn't need another wedding to matter. It didn't need someone else to wear it to be meaningful. It had done its work. I folded it back into the cloth, tied it with the ribbon, and placed it in the cedar chest. Maybe Lily would want it someday. Maybe she wouldn't. That choice would be hers, like this week had been mine. Before bed, I opened my phone. There was one message from Andrew. "Hope you're doing okay. Ceremony went well." I looked at it long enough. Not long enough to feel anything. Just long enough to know what I wanted to do. I deleted it. Not as an act of anger. Just because it was unnecessary. Then I turned off the lamp, slid beneath the covers, and let the quiet hold me. Not as someone waiting for reconciliation, but as someone who had already found release. And in the morning, the daffodils would still be standing. So would I. The days that followed unfolded like pages in a book I hadn't realized I'd been writing. Quiet, steady, filled with moments that belonged only to me. I rearranged the pantry, not because it needed it, but because it made me feel in control of something small. I washed the guest bedroom linens, opened the windows, let the spring air drift through every corner of the house. It wasn't about waiting for company. It was about making space, for peace, for possibility. I got a card in the mail on Wednesday. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Slanted, neat, too careful to be casual. Andrew's. Inside was a photograph of him and his new wife, standing under a wooden arch laced with flowers. Her smile was radiant. His? Forced. It was the kind of smile you offer to cameras, not people. The kind you learn after years of pretending everything is fine. The note inside was short. Thought you might want a picture from the day. I know it was complicated, but I wanted you to have something. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not at them, but at what wasn't in it. There were no parents in the frame, no family. Just two people smiling for strangers. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Instead, I walked the photo to the hall closet, opened the small tin box where I kept things I didn't know what to do with, and tucked it inside. Between an old playbill and the receipt for the rocking chair I'd bought when I first found out I was pregnant. Some memories don't need to be displayed, just stored, acknowledged, then left alone. Limley called that afternoon. "Grandma, I've been thinking." "Dangerous?" I teased gently. She laughed. "I want to visit. Soon. Maybe even bring a friend." "Your boyfriend?" I asked, surprised at my own lightness. "No," she said, hesitating. "Just someone I trust." I paused, letting her know I heard what she wasn't saying. "You're always welcome here. You don't have to explain. This house has space for you and your friend." There was a soft breath on the other end. Relief. Gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. After we hung up, I sat on the porch, the sky pale with early dusk. Across the street, my neighbor walked her golden retriever. A boy rode by on a skateboard, headphones tucked under his hoodie. Normal life. Not grand, not dramatic, but mine. Fully mine. I thought about the way I used to wait for Andrew's calls, how my mood would rise or fall based on whether he remembered my birthday, how much he sent at Christmas, how often he visited. I gave him so much power over my peace. And now, sitting there, with nothing from him but a forced smile and a photo, I felt oddly whole. I reached for the small notebook I kept beside the porch chair, a gift from Helen. The first page was still blank. I opened to it, uncapped a pen, and started writing. Not a letter this time. Not a will. Not even a plan. Just thoughts. I am not missing. I am not lost. I am here. I am not defined by who loves me or who forgets me. I am not erased by being excluded. I am not weakened by walking away. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am becoming. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't profound. But it was true. I closed the notebook and sat back. The sky was turning that dusky pink it only catches for a few minutes before it all fades to gray. I watched until the first stars blinked through. Later that night, I pulled out an old photo album, the kind with sticky pages and plastic covers that crinkled when you turned them. I flipped through pictures of Andrew at every age. His gap-toothed grin in second grade, his arms full of trophies, a science fair ribbon, a fishing trip with George. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just remembered. And then I turned the page and saw something I hadn't in years. A photo of me, holding Andrew in the hospital. My face was puffy, hair a mess, eyes rimmed with exhaustion and awe. I looked so young and so afraid. I reached out and touched the edge of that girl's cheek. "You did your best," I whispered. "You kept him warm. You kept him fed. You loved him, even when he didn't know how to love you back." And maybe that was enough. I didn't close the album. I left it open on the table. Let the air touch the pages. Let the truth breathe. Because hiding the past doesn't heal it. Only honesty does. The phone rang once around 9 p.m. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a message popped up. "Hey, it's me. I know I said some things or didn't say some things. I guess I'm trying to figure it out. I know you came to town. I know Lily saw you. I know I hurt you. I guess I just didn't know how to let you in without dealing with the guilt. I'm sorry. That's all. I'm sorry." He didn't say his name. He didn't have to. I deleted the message. Not out of cruelty, because I didn't need it anymore. Apologies only matter when they come before the silence, not after it's been filled by someone else's dignity. I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of water, brushed my teeth, crawled into bed, and as I lay there in the dark, I thought of something Helen had said in her office days ago. The law won't make him see you, but it will make you feel him. And I had. For the first time in my life, I wasn't asking to be visible. I simply was. The next week arrived without fanfare. Rain washed the streets clean for 2 straight days. The kind of rain that soaks the sidewalks and makes everything smell like turned soil and second chances. I stayed mostly indoors, moving slowly through the house with purpose. I dusted shelves I hadn't touched in months, rearranged the spice rack, cleaned the windows from the inside. There was something holy about the silence. Not loneliness, but solitude. A space where my thoughts could stretch out and breathe. One morning, just after sunrise, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I pulled my cardigan tight around my shoulders and opened it slowly. Lily stood there with a travel bag slung over her shoulder, raindrops clinging to her bangs. Behind her was a young woman with cropped dark hair, wearing a navy jacket and holding a small potted plant in both hands like a peace offering. They both looked nervous, but Lily's eyes were steady. "Hi," she said. "This is Ray." I stepped aside. "Come in?" They moved carefully, like they weren't sure if they belonged yet. I led them to the kitchen, where the kettle was already warming on the stove. Ray placed the plant on the windowsill without a word. It fit. A bright pop of green against the pale wood. We didn't talk about Andrew. We didn't talk about weddings. We didn't even talk about what brought them here. We made eggs, toasted bread. Ray offered to slice the fruit. Lily stirred the honey into my tea the same way I used to do for her when she was little. And just like that, something settled into place. Not repair, not recovery, just presence. Over breakfast, we talked about books, about Lily's classes, Ray's work at a local nonprofit. We laughed at a joke about a horrible landlord. It was the kind of morning I hadn't had in years. Simple, full of small kindnesses, without the heavy need to explain or justify who I was. Later, while Ray napped upstairs, Lily and I sat on the porch, wrapped in old quilts, sipping cocoa and watching the world pass in slow, easy rhythm. She glanced at me. "Do you miss him?" I thought for a long moment. "Sometimes, but it's strange. I think I miss who I thought he'd become, more than who he actually is." She nodded. "I get that. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to carry this." "I know," she said. "But I want you to know I see you. Not as just grandma, not as some forgotten piece of family history, as a person, as someone who tried." Tears welled in my eyes, not from grief, but from being seen. "I used to worry," I admitted, "that everything I did for your father would disappear when he stopped acknowledging it, like it would all just vanish into some void." But it didn't. It became me. And that was it. That was everything. That evening, after they'd gone to bed, I sat again at the little kitchen table with my notebook. I opened to a new page and wrote, "Legacy isn't measured by who invites you to a wedding. It's measured by who shows up at your door with wet shoes and a plant and asks to stay a while." I touched the notebook away and turned off the light. The next day, Ray helped me pull weeds in the front garden. She wore thick gloves and worked in silence, humming occasionally under her breath. She didn't ask for anything. She just existed beside me like she belonged there. Lily joined us later, kneeling in the dirt, her laughter ringing out as she found a worm and pretended to be horrified. We stayed outside until the sun turned our necks pink and the air smelled like grass and hope. I hadn't felt so young in years. That afternoon, I asked them both to help me go through some old boxes in the attic. We pulled down dusty containers filled with photos, baby clothes, old letters. At first, it felt like excavation, digging through remnants of a life that had been shelved. But as we moved through each item, something lighter emerged. A memory, a story, a laugh. The past didn't feel like a weight anymore. It felt like a gift I could offer freely without fear of being discarded. At one point, Lily held up an old scarf and asked, "Was this yours?" "No," I smiled. "That was your grandfather's. He wore it every winter, even inside." She wrapped it around her shoulders and spun. Stylish. I could almost hear George's chuckle in the room, the kind that started low and warmed the walls. That night, we cooked dinner together. Ray made pasta from scratch. Lily chopped vegetables like a pro. I poured wine, just one glass, and set the table with cloth napkins I hadn't used since George passed. We ate by candlelight, not out of ceremony, but because the power had flickered in the storm and we hadn't bothered to fix it yet. We talked long into the night. Not about pain, not about betrayal, about dreams, about fears, about what it meant to choose your family instead of just inherit it. When they left the next morning, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt full. Lily hugged me tight. "I'll be back soon." Ray squeezed my hand. "Thank you for trusting me with your space. Thank you for being gentle with it." After they drove away, I stood in the doorway for a long time, letting the wind blow across the porch. The house was quiet again, but not empty, because something had changed. I had stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing myself. After Lily and Ray left, I didn't rush to sweep up the memories they left behind. Their cups were still in the sink. A blanket was draped over the back of the couch. The guest room held the soft scent of Ray's shampoo and the faint impression of two young women who weren't afraid to be real with me. I let it linger. I moved for the house like someone walking through a symphony that had just ended, every room still echoing with warmth. I didn't think about Andrew that week. Not once. Not because I'd erased him, but because I had finally placed him in the right frame. He was no longer the center of my story. He was just a chapter. A long, complicated one, yes, but no longer the defining piece. I was done measuring my worth against his silence. Instead, I called Helen. I asked if she wanted to come by for tea. She arrived the next day with a lemon cake in one hand and a new book in the other. We sat on the porch and talked about everything except what had happened. She didn't ask how the trip went. She didn't ask about the wedding. She just let me exist. Fully. Unquestioned. At one point, she turned to me and said, "You look taller." I laughed. "I think I'm just not hunched under years of waiting anymore. I like this version of you." So do I. But days passed easily after that. I started going for walks again, not the short ones around the block, but longer ones through the trails behind the park. I watched birds. I noticed which flowers bloomed first and which ones held back until late spring. I brought a small notebook with me and jotted down thoughts. Not poems, not journals, just things that came and went like butterflies. Delicate, worth catching, but not caging. One afternoon, I sat on a bench near the creek and saw a young couple walking ahead of me. They were holding hands, speaking quietly. The woman laughed and bumped her shoulder into the man. He leaned in and kissed his temple like it was the most natural thing in the world. Once upon a time, that would have hurt to see. I would have remembered George or felt a pang about the kind of connection I never had with Andrew as an adult. But not that day. That day, I simply smiled. Because love doesn't end when it leaves a room. It echoes. It finds its way back in different forms. Like in Lily's eyes when she poured my tea. Like in Ray's silent help in the garden. Like in Helen's presence, steady and unflinching. I started hosting Sunday lunches again. Just small ones. Helen came. My neighbor Teresa brought her teenage son once. We shared stories and recipes, laughed about silly things. It wasn't about recreating the past. It was about creating something new. Something mine. I never told Andrew about the will. I never needed to. The lawyer finalized everything quietly. The house remained in my name, my accounts untouched. There was a time I had worried about protecting what was mine, clutching every detail, guarding every asset like it was the last thread holding my identity together. But I realized something sitting at that lawyer's desk the week I got back. You don't defend your value. You live it. And if people can't see that, they were never looking in the first place. A few days later, a card arrived from Lily. No message inside. Just a drawing, a sketch she'd done herself. It was of the porch, the two of us sitting side by side, wrapped in blankets, cocoa in our hands. A little dog sat between us that didn't exist in real life, but I loved that she'd added it. She had titled it in small print, Chosen. That's what I had become. Not the forgotten mother, not the invisible guest, but a woman who chose herself when no one else did. A week after that, I was cleaning out the top drawer of my nightstand and found the small box where I used to keep my wedding band. I hadn't worn it in years, not since George passed. I took it out and turned it over in my hand. The engraving inside had worn thin, but I still remembered the words. For all your seasons. I slipped it onto my finger, not out of grief, but gratitude. George had loved me the best he could. I had loved him with all I had. That was enough. That night, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror brushing my hair, I looked into my own eyes and saw someone I hadn't seen in a long time. Not a wife, not a mother, just me. I whispered to her, "You're enough." And I believed it. I went to bed early, the house clean, my heart unburdened. No more waiting. No more wondering if I'd done something wrong. No more rehearsing the perfect words to fix something that was never mine to heal. In the quiet, in the dark, I felt it. Peace. Soft, uncomplicated, true. And before I drifted to sleep, I thought only one thing. Let them have their pictures, their guest lists, their polite silences and carefully arranged stories. I have my name. I have my breath. I have tomorrow. And I have people who see me. Even if it's only a few. That's more than enough. The following Monday, I received a letter. Not a bill, not a flyer. A real letter. Handwritten. The envelope was plain, no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably Andrew's. Angular, cautious, like every letter was afraid to settle fully onto the page. I hesitated before opening it. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. It wasn't fear or hope I felt. It was distance. I opened it slowly, unfolded the single sheet, and read. Mom, I don't know how to start this. Maybe I never did. Maybe that's been the problem all along. I've thought about calling you 100 times, but I figured if I said it all at once, it might come out clearer. I know I've hurt you. I know I've said things that can't be unsaid. I also know that I was trying so hard to live a life I thought I was supposed to have that I stopped paying attention to who helped me build it in the first place. I'm sorry for how the wedding unfolded. I'm sorry for letting distance turn into absence. I'm sorry for making you feel invisible. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want another day to pass without saying it out loud. There was no closing. No, love Andrew. Just a name at the top, words in the middle, and a silence at the end. I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply set it in a drawer, not the trash, not the fireplace, somewhere quiet, somewhere neutral. Forgiveness is strange. People think it's a door that swings open, but sometimes it's just a window that gets cracked to let the air in. I didn't forgive him in that moment, but I didn't hate him either. I just let him be human, flawed. late, and no longer necessary for my peace. That evening, Helen called to see if I wanted to go to a local reading at the library. I hadn't been to anything like that in years. I almost said no out of habit, but then I heard myself say, "What time should I be ready?" I wore a scarf Lily had given me, twisted around my neck like a small promise. The reading was intimate. Maybe 20 people. An older woman read poems about growing up in a house with 7 sisters. Her voice was steady, raw. At one point, she paused and said, "Sometimes survival means planting your own roots when your family cuts the tree down." I looked over at Helen. She gave me the smallest nod. After the reading, I bought the book and asked the author to sign it. She smiled and said, "Thank you for coming." I meant to say thank you back, but what came out was, "I needed this more than you know." When I got home that night, I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window with the book open on my lap. The daffodils outside had begun to wilt, their heads bowed low, but still vibrant in color. I didn't feel sad watching them. Nature doesn't apologize for changing. It just does. It becomes. The next morning, I took a walk to the local post office and bought a pack of thank you cards. Not for anyone in particular, just because I wanted to send light into the world. I wrote one for Lily, telling her how proud I was. I wrote one to Ray, thanking her for her quiet strength. I even wrote one to the librarian who organized the poetry night, though I didn't know her name. That afternoon, I stood in front of my closet, looking at dresses I hadn't worn in years. Some still had tags. Some still carried faint memories on the fabric. Holidays, birthdays, moments that hadn't always felt like they belonged to me. I pulled out 3 of them, folded them neatly, and dropped them off at the local shelter the next day. It felt good to give without needing acknowledgement. I started volunteering once a week, just answering the phones at a food pantry. The work wasn't glamorous, but the people were kind, grateful, real. On my second shift, a young woman about Lily's age asked if I was new. I told her yes, and she said, "Well, we're lucky to have you." And she meant it. That night, I made a list. Not resolutions, not goals, just intentions. Breathe deeper. Say no when I need to. Say yes when I want to. Make space for joy. Let go of what doesn't return with grace. Stay soft. I taped it to the fridge. The bays didn't become extraordinary, but they became mine, fully. And that was enough. One Saturday morning, while clipping lavender in the backyard, I heard laughter over the fence. My neighbor's kids were playing tag. One of them tripped, and I saw their mother rush out barefoot, scooping him into her arms with the kind of love that has no pause. It made me smile. Not with longing, but with recognition. That used to be me. And in some ways, still was. Because even if your arms are empty now, the love that lived in them doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It stretches. It finds new homes. Sometimes in granddaughters, sometimes in strangers, sometimes, finally, in yourself. I closed my eyes and let the sun warm my face. No more looking over my shoulder, no more scanning the horizon for who might come back. I was here, fully. And I wasn't waiting for permission to stay. A month later, I stood in my backyard with a small box in my hands. Inside were things I hadn't touched in years. A pressed flower from my wedding day, George's cufflink, a drawing Andrew made when he was 6, and a folded napkin with my mother's handwriting still visible. "You're stronger than you feel." I didn't plan a ceremony. I didn't call anyone. I just stepped out onto the grass barefoot and let the earth hold the weight of the moment. I buried the box near the roots of the old oak tree at the edge of the garden. Not out of grief, but as a thank you. For the love that shaped me, for the memories that both held and hurt me, for the parts of myself I was finally setting free. Afterward, I sat on the porch and watched the breeze lift through the branches. The light filtered down in golden streaks, soft and forgiving. I thought about all the years I tried so hard to be seen. By Andrew, by the family that grew around him, by a world that only valued women for their roles in other people's lives. I used to think invisibility was the worst fate, but now I understood something else. Being invisible to people who never tried to know you isn't a loss. It's a redirection, a gift, a clear path back to yourself. Helen came by that afternoon with fresh bread. We didn't talk much, we just sat, shoulder to shoulder, watching the birds land on the feeder she had helped me install last spring. At one point, she turned and said, "You know, I used to think aging meant disappearing, but watching you, it looks more like unfolding." I felt tears prick behind my eyes. Not from sadness, from truth. "That's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me," I whispered. The mail arrived around 3. A small package was tucked between 2 bills. It was from Lily. Inside was a framed photo. The one she had sketched, now made real. Someone had taken it the day she visited. Me and her, wrapped in blankets, sipping cocoa, Ray's feet barely visible in the background. We were laughing. Fully. Freely. I placed it on the windowsill next to the potted plant Ray had left behind. I didn't reach for my phone to call or text her. I didn't need to. That photo said everything. Later that week, I was asked to speak at the community center's storytelling night. I almost said no, but something in me leaned forward, so I said yes. When the night came, I stood at the small microphone in a room of folding chairs and flickering string lights, and I told my story, not with bitterness, but with strength. I spoke about being a mother, about being forgotten, about traveling across states to learn how to stand still and say, "No more." And when I finished, the room was silent. Not empty, just full of listening. Then someone clapped. Then another. And soon the room rose to their feet. I didn't cry until I got home. Not because of the applause, but because I had finally spoken aloud the story I had kept buried under decades of pleasing, of forgiving too quickly, of making myself small for people who never offered space. And I hadn't crumbled. I had risen. That night, I wrote one last line in my notebook. I gave birth to a son. I raised him. I lost him. And I found myself. The next morning, the sun was soft and pale. I poured my coffee and stepped outside. The grass was cool underfoot. A single white flower had bloomed near the oak tree. I smiled at it. Let it bloom. Let it grow. I don't know what comes next. I don't know if Andrew will ever visit again, or if he'll send another letter. I don't know if Lily and Ray will move nearby, or if life will pull them in another direction, but I do know this. I will not chase people who treat me like an option. I will not silence myself to keep the peace. I will not disappear quietly. I am not just someone's mother, or widow, or guest. I am someone. And I choose me. If you've ever been left out, overlooked, or forgotten by those who should have known better, I want you to hear this. You are not the absence in someone else's photo. You are the frame that holds everything together. Thank you for walking this journey with me. And if my story reached you, subscribe for more. You are not alone anymore.